I want to talk to you today about Power BI design and thinking outside the box, because I think we all know these one-size-fits-all dashboards, but there's so much more possible if you dare to think outside the box. And I want to give you some examples and some ideas how you can do it. Also some warnings, because sometimes you need to think a little bit more inside the box again. So I want to talk to you about that. And I think that's so important to think about, because this is what I call dashboard design delivery disappointment. So you spend hours building an awesome report. You love it. You spend so much time with the data. You cleaned the data. You did the report. And then you give it to the user. And they're like, no, not interested. No one uses it. There goes your report. And we want to prevent that, of course. You want to deliver something that's really, for your customer and what really works for them. So I want to talk about that and prevent that, so you're a happy porcupine. So I'm Valerie Jung. Really short introduction. I'm all about data analytics, visualization, storytelling, but also standardization, documentation, and improving processes using data. Because I think we have so much data and it's so valuable. And if you visualize it in a good way, in an understandable way, you can actually use it to improve your processes and also test if it works. Like I said before, there's not this one size fits all. I think it's this one size fits no one. If you look at the dashboards on the left, these are dashboards provided by Microsoft. If you go to the Learn environment from Microsoft, this is what they're showing, like, you can build this. But if you build something like this, it probably doesn't do what you want for the customer, because it's just a lot of colors and a lot of information. On the right, you see a financial dashboard. That's actually something, a company in the Netherlands, they're building this. And they're saying you can buy this template for 500 euros. And then you can just put your data in it. And then you have these reports and you don't need to have any knowledge at all. And I have customers that used this template. And then they use it for like a week. And then they see, okay, I'm actually missing data. And then they start their own pages. So they have an extra page and they try their own stuff. So what I'm seeing is 5 pages of really quite okay templates and 20 pages from the customer where they tried it themselves, and after 20 pages they just give up and then they call, like, can you help us? And the thing is, we always say there's this one thing and you just buy it, and it's such a nice idea. Just think about it. You spend like 500 euros and you never need to hire anyone, but that's not how it works. So instead of doing something really in a template, I'm really specialized in thinking outside the box. I'm always trying something new. And I'm looking at the situation of the customer, or if I'm designing something for myself, and ask myself, can I do something different? And does it add value? And that's something really important. For example, at the top left it's my personal dashboard. It's a diving dashboard. I'm logging all my dives on a dive computer and a little book. And I put all the data in Excel and then import it into Power BI. And on the left is a little bit more traditional way of showing data. And on the right, in the dashboard, it's really an infographic. That's also Power BI. It's also possible. But you see, there's not so much data in it. But it's fantastic, because if I want to talk about diving and people ask me, how much diving did you do? Where did you dive? I don't want to show them a table with all the information in it. I just want to show them like a pretty dashboard, like, hey, 84 dives.
Egypt.
6 countries, a lot of diving in Egypt, exactly. And that that works much better for me than the more traditional way of showing the data. On the top right, you see a dark mode dashboard, and I will talk about that later. I work a lot in dark mode. All tools I'm using that I can use dark mode are actually in dark mode. And I thought it was really odd that most dashboards are designed in light mode. So if you're working in dark mode and the only thing in light mode is the Power BI dashboard you're working with, your screen will actually give light back. On the bottom left, you see a minimalistic design, and we'll talk about that later. And I also, my resume, I also put in Power BI. And not because you can't, it's the best way to do it, but I thought it's a great way to show that I can actually work in Power BI. If I'm applying for a job, I can show them, hey, this is my resume and it's in Power BI. So I'm always trying also to challenge myself, but also a little bit the customer. And if you have a really traditional customer, it can be quite tough to get them to use dark mode dashboards. Like, okay, we do everything different, but you can always try to take little steps. And I have this 3-step approach myself that I'm always doing, and it's research, create, and deliver. And what I mean with research is I'm really checking the audience and the message they actually want to get through. And what I mean with the audience, this is actually your customer, the person or the group or the company you're designing for. They have needs. They want something from you. They maybe don't even know what they want. Often they think or say to me, can you build a sales dashboard? And yeah, of course I can build a sales dashboard, but what do you want to see? Which actions do you want to take? It's important because your actions, your company is really different from another company. It maybe doesn't feel like that, but the actions you want to take and the insights you want to create are really different. So we need to get to know them, and then we can use them to create something really useful. Because otherwise, what happens is that you get these dashboards with all the information in it. Because if someone asks you for a sales dashboard and you put all the sales information you have, that's a lot of information. If you know what they're looking for, you can filter to that. And also, how much detail do they really need? That's the same, like we want a sales dashboard. When I ask how much detail do you need, they're saying all. We need everything, and we need like the last 10 years of data. And it needs to be real time. And when I ask them, for example, okay, you need real time, but how often does your data source get refreshed? They're saying at night once. Okay, but why do we want Power BI to be refreshed like every 5 minutes? Nothing's going to change. So I really start these discussions because I think it's important. Because maybe they think they need all the detail, but maybe that's not even the case. And people can get really confused if you give them too much detail. And sometimes they even get lost in the reports because then they have options like filtering and drill throughs, and before they know they're 5 pages further. So it's really important to know who you're creating a report for, what they want to see, how much detail do they need, and also how they're going to access it. And I put this point in the presentation because I actually have customers that they have really pretty online dashboards, and what they're doing is they're making physical copies of it. If you're making physical copies of a dashboard, none of your filters, drill tools, or stuff is working anymore because you can't push a piece of paper, like you can't filter anymore. And when I started in consultancy, I never checked for that. And I've created reports that were really fancy and you had all the options of click through. And then I saw the people sitting in the meeting with a physical copy. And I said, okay, if I would have asked that and would have known that, I would have designed something different because they have really different needs. So what I'm always doing now is I'm also creating personas. So first I have this check of who's my audience and what do they need. And then I try to create personas. And if you're designing something for one person or one team of people that are really similar to each other, it could also be one person. But the bigger the audience gets, the harder it gets to design something for this one person in the group. So I try to group them, get all their needs and wishes and the similarities and differences of them, and also their experience. Because sometimes you're creating something for the whole company, for example, but there's an IT team, maybe a business intelligence team, and they are really into the dashboards, the reports, the data. But there are also people that really never opened Power BI, they never opened the report, maybe they never even opened Excel or something like that. And if you need to design something for all of them, you need to get a little bit more creative. Because if you design a traditional report for this group, you can be certain that about 60–70% of the group will not understand it because they don't have the experience and maybe they don't even know how to read the data or how to interpret it. So it always helps me to have these personas, because if I know I have a really big group, I know the data needs to be simple, or maybe there needs to be 2 or 3 dashboards that for the different groups. If I know the people are really similar to each other, then I know, okay, I can design something more specific for them. And then if you know the people you're designing for, of course, it's really important to know what's the message. What information do you want to get through in your dashboard or report? Which questions do you want to answer? And I always say, pick like one key message and get information about the context, the information they want to get, and the actions to take. An example could be indeed a sales dashboard for the sales team every year. That would be the context, like a yearly dashboard for the sales team. Which information do they want to see? For example, product information, but also they want a ranking of each other in the sales team, how they are performing. And which actions do they want to take? They want to evaluate. It could also be a dashboard for the account managers, and the actions to take could be, I want to see if I hit my target, yes or no. If you know what their action is, you can put it also in the dashboard. For example, if they want to know if they hit the target, yes or no, you could visualize that and could show them visually, okay, it's October, this month I've hit my target. But last month I didn't hit my target. And then, of course, they want to see why. So if you know which actions they want to take and what the actual message is, you can design accordingly. And the example on the right is something I found in a newspaper, and it's actually about, I think, money laundering. And that was the message. They wanted to show the countries where a lot of money laundering happens and where the money goes to. And you see, the person who created this wanted it to be really, really visual, but I think no one can read this. So then the action to take isn't there. It's just a pretty picture. And it's so important to not forget that you need to have a message to answer, because you can have the prettiest dashboard with all the fancy visuals. If no one can interpret them and knows what they say, it's useless. And when I'm designing, I always try to remember a different message means a different design. And the arrow at the left shows the level of detail. For example, the 2 dashboards on the left, they're more infographic styles. So the message could be, we want to inform everyone in the company about our yearly goals. And it's just informative. It's just the KPIs. We don't want to share all our data. We just want to show every employee in the company how are we doing. We will put it in our yearly meeting in a PowerPoint, and we'll send a newsletter. So that's a really broad message, like just the KPIs, just informative. nothing fancy. People will not be able to click on stuff because they will put it in an email as a screenshot probably, or on a PowerPoint. So you need to make it really simple. The two dashboards in the middle, they're actually dashboards for a group of people that has as action, we want to see the information, but then we also want to click through and get to know why that what we see happens. So you see there are more options at the top. You see some filters. These are dashboards you can actually click on. And the dashboard on the bottom right is actually designed for a group of business analysts. And they said, okay, we like your visuals, really fancy, nice, but we want to make our own analysis. So please just provide us with the data, because the actions we want to take with the data is we want to make our own analysis. We want to take some extra steps. We want to have some guidance. We want to have some overview information, but we also want to be able to do our own analysis. So these are also different actions people take. And these different messages and different questions you try to answer, you can see them in a different design. But when you know your audience and you know a little bit what they want, you know the question, then you have an idea about what you would like to create. But then you, of course, have a lot of different design types. And I will not talk about the traditional Power BI design, which is white with white background and black visuals. Not because it's bad. I think there's a market for all of these things. But I want to show you a little bit more about the more creative stuff and the pros and cons. For example, the dark mode dashboard. I was triggered by that because I presented at a conference and someone asked me, I showed a darker dashboard and someone asked me, do you ever really use that? And do you think customers really want to see that? Why not? Yes, I use that. And why wouldn't they? But how would I sell it? So, well, there's a market for everything, but we need to check if it actually makes sense for the people you're designing for to have a dark mode dashboard. Because, for example, the dark mode dashboards are really, really nice when you're in a darker environment. When you're in a really light environment, actually light mode dashboards work better because everything around you is light, and then the white screen, it's actually quite relaxing. In a darker environment, it's actually nicer to look at a dark background because your eyes are less stressed. So if you're working in a darker environment, why not use it? It can help you to focus more. And if you're like me using all tools in dark mode, it's also a consistent experience because everything has the same colors. And there is a little bit more emphasis on the content if you're using it right, because with dark mode, you can also do it less good. Because if you're having a lot of a design that calls for a lot of colors, because, for example, you have a lot of product groups, or you want to show a lot of different things, so you have a lot of colors, they will get lost in a dark mode dashboard. These dashboards work best if you have 2 or 3 colors in them, and then they're okay. If you're having astigmatism, so that's some problem with your eyes, it can be really hard to read the text because the text is white or light gray, and it can be hard for these people to read the text written down there. So it's really important that you don't put tables in it. They are horrible to read. If you're having too much content, of course, it's the same with the light mode dashboard. It's hard to read them, and you really need to check accessibility for people with color blindness. And I have some examples about that later. So you see there are quite some pros, but there are also cons. So how are you choosing? Like with all the designs, I'm always asking myself, does it make sense? And does the user actually benefit from it? And I have 3 examples for you. Actually, this was real case for me, a real customer also. They had a support team, and they already had Power BI dashboards, but they weren't used by the team. And they also had a big screen at the corner of the room with the dashboard on it, which looked really, really odd because the room had kind of the same lighting condition as this room. It was quite dark. These were all developers in the support team members. They just didn't put the light on. They were relaxed and just working there. And then there was this big screen with a white dashboard showing them their support tickets, open tickets, closed tickets, pending tickets. And I had to talk with them, and all the tools they use were actually in dark mode. So they also told me every time I'm looking at the Power BI dashboard to get a little bit more information on my tickets, or I get an overview about how I'm doing today, it's really weird because it looks so different. It's not what I'm used to. So for them, it actually made sense to create a dark mode dashboard looking in the same color scheme as the other tools they were using, because it felt familiar. And it actually improved the usage of the report. Then there's an example, if you design company-wide, that's a tough one, because I showed you the pros and the cons. So people with astigmatism, eye problems, color blindness, they can have trouble to actually see the dashboards created in dark mode. So if you are designing for a big company, what do you choose? It can be tricky. Something I'm often doing, if I have the option to do dark mode, is I build in a switch to switch between light and dark mode, because there can be teams that actually profit from the dark mode, like, for example, a support team, or someone working from home in a dark environment. But there could also be part of the company that really would benefit from the light mode. And if you're working in Power BI with templates, and they're quite easy to implement if you're getting used to it. Everything's easy if you get used to it, but it's not that hard. It's quite easy to switch between the color schemes. So I'm always, if I get the possibility to choose or to give them 2 choices, I try to give them 2 choices, and they just can push a button and then they change the colors.
You can dynamically change the template within the push. Oh.
I do it with different pages.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's a little bit of cheating, I know. And it'd be a really fantastic feature to change it dynamically. Mm. And then there's the third example. Like I said before, there is this group of people that really like physical copies. Please don't do that with dark mode dashboards, because that will be a horrible amount of black ink. And often I see people make these physical copies because they want to write on it. You also can't do that on a dark mode dashboard, or you have a white pen, but it's going a little bit far. So if you are designing something for a group and they ask, or you wonder if dark mode dashboards would work for them, ask them, how are you going to use it? If they're saying, I will make physical copies, maybe not the best person. In dark mode design, it's really important to choose the right colors. Like I said, if you use too much colors, too many colors, it's unreadable. But if you, in these 2 examples, I have blue and orange. If you're using the orange example, there's actually already a lot of contrast. And it's really nice for me to look at it as an informative dashboard, just to get an overview. But it's really, really hard to highlight anything in it because it's already orange. If you look at the blue dashboard, it's a lot calmer, but a little bit less contrast. But if you want to put a highlight on it, you could put something orange on it, and then it pops out. but you really need to think about the color choices beforehand. And that's something I see a lot in dark mode dashboards, what's going wrong, that people just pick nice colors like yellow and bright green and bright blue, but then you don't see anything anymore. And you really, really have to check with the dark mode dashboards the accessibility, because there are really a lot of forms of color blindness. And mostly we think about red and green color blindness, but there are also people that that only see in gray tones, or they can't see the colors or the contrast that well, because there's so many types. And I always use a website. It's called color/blindness.com. And you can just import pictures and then click on different types of color blindness. It's really nice to check. But you see in these examples, it can be really, really tough to look at the information. So you need to check that, because it also would be the same if you design something in dark mode and you finally can design something different than the standard dashboard, and then people can't use it because they can't read it. And you can prevent the that you can't read it by using a lot of contrast, just really bright colors. But then you again have to check with the other users, because if you use bright orange, it can also be painful for your eyes. So that's really something you need to check with dark mode. Something else, something really, really different that I love to use is the infographic. Like I told you, I did this with my diving dashboard. And I love infographics because they're visually appealing most of the time. If you're doing a good job, they're mostly visually appealing, and they're really easy to understand. Because in an infographic, it's just like a flyer. You don't want to put too much information in it. You want to make it understandable for someone that has no clue about data. You just want to share some information. And this is, of course, my diving logbook. But you also could do this with a company update. And this way, people can't scroll through, they can't filter. It's just the information, but it's really easy to understand. Downside, of course, there's less details. There are less options. And I actually had a discussion with someone that said, but we could put a through page behind it. So if you click on information, you could go to another page and get more information. But personally, I think that doesn't work, because then you have a completely different experience. You have this infographic and like really just the key information, and then you click on one point and drill down on it. If you want more information, what I'm doing actually is providing another page with more information, and then give people the option to drill through to that. Because also it can be hard if you click on a number and you go to drill through, it's hard to remember where did I click on. It's just not made for these kind of designs. These are not for heavy data users because they can't click anywhere. And this is really, really different to do hand. Excuse me. Because there's a secret how I built this. I prepared the design beforehand. So what you actually see is on the left, I have a vector image. And I actually put the image in PowerPoint. And then you can save the image as SVG. And if you do that, you can load it in Power BI as a background. And then I just put the information in Power BI on top of it. The thing is, you get a really nice dashboard. But think about you leaving the company and you need to do a handover. That will be horrible for people. So I'm really loving the infographics, but you always have to keep in mind, can I do a handover? And you need to document them really, really well. And I use PowerPoint because, of course, most of us have that. But I also saw a tutorial with Figma. I think Figma is paid, but gives you a lot of options. And there's also Canva. And actually, you can use every kind of tool if you can save the picture as SVG. Oh, and I use free vector images. They're from Vecteezy, and they have like huge choice of images. So if you ever want to try this, I can recommend go to the website, download some free images, and just try it. Then we also have minimalist. Minimalist is actually a mix. It's a combination of an infographic, I forgot the R in infographic, and insights. And a minimalist dashboard actually doesn't give the user too much choices, but it gives them a little bit more choice than an infographic. Because in the infographic, I said you can't click, fit, or do anything. But in minimalist dashboards, I try to combine visuals, but also a little bit of explanation, a little bit of text, and maybe some filter options. This is quite easy. These are quite easy to understand because you can also use some text, and Power BI also has an option to have smart. I don't know what's the real name of it, but you can fill in some information and then add the metrics to get the numbers, and then it's just a text field. Smart narrative, exactly. So I'm trying to add that because there are quite some people that have difficulties with reading visuals. So they're seeing a visual and they're like, okay, they see bar charts. And now, what does it mean? So if you're adding some text for these people, they actually see, oh, this is what's happening. Even if they don't understand the visual, they still understand what's happening. So I love these dashboards for dashboards that are meant for big company updates or for different teams. Teams that where some people have some experience with data and others don't. Because the people that don't need all the information, they just look at the first page. And the people that need a little bit more information or want to filter, they can click through or filter some more. So this is quite a nice way of at least having your first page on a dashboard less crowded. And I also have a create tool. That's actually how you create that stuff. I'm using always storyboards, templates, and visuals. And especially the storyboard, which comes from storytelling, can be really, really useful. Because when you did your research, you actually know the audience, what they need, the message they want to answer. And you maybe have an idea what you want to create, like a traditional dashboard or a dark mode or an infographic. But you don't know, does it actually work? Does it fit? Do I have all the information I need? So what I'm doing, I always have like a storyboard. And this is actually a picture of my couch, put pen and paper, snippets of the dashboard. And I put there all the information, like the KPIs, what I want to know. I put the information about the audience on it. And also, if I have some ideas how I would like to visualize stuff, I also do that there. And what I'm then doing is rearranging that in front of me. Like, this is my user, this is their question, and this in front of me is the dashboard I think I want to create, and I think it would work. And then I put all the information there and check if it still works, and if I have all the information, and if actually all the information in there makes sense. So I can highly encourage you to try it. The first time it feels really weird because it feels like extra work. But I realized since I'm doing that, that sometimes I also have all the information in front of me, and then I think, wait, now that I have this in front of me, I think I could do it in a different way, or now I have a new idea, or now I'm seeing this information, maybe a different dashboard style would work better. So sometimes I think I can do an infographic, but then I see all the information they really need, and I think maybe minimalist style works better for this group. So this actually also helps me to have a conversation with the customer. And what I'm also doing, and that's the example at the bottom left, is for the customer, I actually make these mock-ups. I just draw them on a tablet. And I give them some ideas about how things could look like. And I experienced that when I'm doing that, and I'm showing them different options, like a traditional dashboard, minimalist dashboard, and an infographic, and just draw it really fast, that they're much more interested in giving it a try, because then they can actually see it and they're like, oh, we want the traditional, but how much extra work would it be to try the minimalist? Because then they get an idea, they get used to it, and the moment you deliver the dashboard, they're much more likely to say, oh, we will try it, because these are the baby steps, making them getting used to stuff. And it's really important to keep that step simple. When I did that for the first time, I draw for hours. I was like, it's maybe a waste of time. So I just try to make that simple. And by now I have templates of these things too. So the more often you're doing this stuff, the easier it gets. And these are also the templates I'm talking about. I'm using templates for about everything, because I think it's really, really important to have a consistent style. So if you have a customer and they have a certain color scheme, in this example green, I try to use the same color scheme, at least in all the dashboards. Even if the dashboard type is really different, an infographic, a table, but I try to have the same color scheme to, when I'm using filters, try to put them at the same position every time. If I'm using special colors, for example, for product groups, try to use them in all the dashboards, so be consistent. The thing is, it sounds a little bit funny, but it makes it easier for the customer to look at the dashboards, because they know what they can expect. If you know, it doesn't matter which of these 20 dashboards I'm opening, the filters are always at the top. You don't have to think about it. If you know, if there's a warning, or if you need to take some steps, there will be an orange flag. You know where to look. So that makes it really easy. And the templates, I always use them as a starting point. And then on the way, of course, they also change a little bit. But it's also for the consistency and using it as a team. If you're working with other people, these are really great. And also, if you're working with people with a little bit less experience, it can really help them to get used to the way of working and the color schemes. Color schemes are always nice, because if people recognize stuff, it's easier to see what they need. But also, color schemes are important because not all colors are matching. So if you're using green, you can check which other colors match well with green. There are also websites for that. And I'm a big fan of color schemes, but I also work with people that went a little bit too far with them, because I always try to incorporate the company color just a little bit. And I actually worked with someone, was a pretty new consultant, and he thought, I will also do that, but the company color was actually bright red and bright green. And he presented a dashboard to me, which was just bright red. Everything was red. And I thought, maybe we need to do this a little bit different. But then we looked up color schemes that actually included the bright red, but also had other colors. So what we did in the end was using a little bit of the bright red at some places, and the other stuff was a little bit more chill. So it wasn't, again, when you opened the report, you looked at this red report. And that also helps for the way of working. I'm naming the way of working here because a lot of companies struggle with reports. They create really a lot of different reports. Someone has an idea and then they create something. And then someone else in the team has an idea and they create something completely different. If you're using templates and color schemes, you can at least keep the main points the same. So even if you're using infographics or minimalist styles or traditional styles, I always try to have some templates for my customers, to have some color schemes for them, and to also document it in a way that everyone in the team knows what they should do. And then you also can have a discussion. If you're having someone in your team that's doing something completely different, you can also talk to them about, okay, we have this way of working, we have these templates and color schemes, you choose to do something else. Can you explain why? Maybe they have a really good reason, but then you can at least have a discussion with them and not telling them, I don't like the way you're doing something. It makes it easier. I think something else when you're designing outside the box is to choose the right visuals. And this is an example. These 6 visuals all have exactly the same data. It says by territory. It says by territory, but it's visualized in different ways. And on the top left, you see pie chart, of course, really hard to read the sales per territory. The bottom left, that's easier to read. But for example, in the middle, at the top middle, you see a map. The map, of course, doesn't show you the information in the same way as the bar chart. But doesn't need to. It could be that your user or the people you're designing for isn't even interested in the numbers. They just want to see which region actually had the biggest sales. They don't want to see the numbers. Then the map would work for them. In an infographic, this would work better than the bar chart. On the in the middle, at the bottom, we see this. It always looks a little bit like art. And I worked at a company where they actually had something that looked like this at the wall, and it was to make it a little bit calmer in the room. That's what remembers me of. It's really hard to read. And I actually talked to someone and they said, I would never use that. And I wouldn't use it for the sales per territory. But maybe if you have a top 2 or top 3, and you don't need to see the exact numbers, but you just want to see which is the biggest, maybe it could work. And the same with the visuals on the right. They're just different ways of showing data. And the visual at the bottom right is actually a table with conditional formatting, where also a bar chart is included. So it's kind of best of both worlds. People that want to see a table because we need the table can still have the table. But people that really want to have visual information can have a chart in it. So the 6 visuals actually show exactly the same information, but in a different way. And that's so important if you want to design something really for your audience, to think, will I do the standard, which is bottom left probably, or does my audience actually need something else? And what works best is just to simply ask them. Like you could say, you want to see the sales per territory. If I show you this map and you see the territories marked in green, does this work for you? You get an answer to that. Sometimes it's as simple as that. And if you get the answer like we need, or we only need simple representation of our data, then you could already think about designing an infographic. If they're not interested in all the data, why not do something like that? But if you're asking really the customer about these things, these are the baby steps you need to take, because then they get used to it. They're like, oh, we thought we needed all the information on the table, but now we see these options. This works actually better for us. So if you take them with you on the way, it's easier to actually sell something new, show them that there are more things possible than they maybe think. And something else I think is important, to make it as simple as possible, if you can. On the top left, you see sales targets hit. And this is actually some ducks playing around. What I'm doing is I color the bar charts gray that are below a target, and everything above a target I color in green. That's for a customer that really wants to see a little bit more of detail. You still don't have data labels, but it's a little bit more detailed. But on the other hand, maybe they don't need to see it that much in detail. Maybe the visual on the top right is enough. They just see the months, because it says the same. So the same as with the other visuals, I'm just discussing this with the customer. I'm just like, this is an option, this is an option, tell me. And we can always try both. And that's also really important. I'm all about simplifying dashboards. And sometimes customers are a little bit afraid, because they think if you make it now too simple, then we can go never back. It's of course not the case. You can make it less simple again. So always think about these things. And the last thing is, of course, the delivery. How do you deliver something that you designed that's outside the box? It's really, really important to evaluate in between, not just at the end. Often people think, I get a task, I will do the task, and then at the end, they get the product and everything will be fine. And most of the time, nothing is fine. You really need to evaluate in between. At the beginning, having a kickoff, telling them your ideas, listening about their ideas, getting to know them. And then after the first concept is created, show it to them, talk to them about it, discuss it, ask them, what do they see? How would you use it? Also check your assumptions. Maybe you made some assumptions on the way and you thought, this is really useful, or they really want to see that, check that. So have these evaluations in between and evaluate with the user. And of course, also at the end, and not just the moment you give them the dashboard, but a month after, 2 months after, do a check, do they actually open it? And really check if they open it. In Power BI services, you can actually see really easily if a report is opened, because people tend to not tell you. And I actually have been in a meeting with a group, a management group, and they got a sales report, and I asked them, how do you like it? Are you using it a lot? Yes, we're using it a lot. Yeah, we're loving it. And I was like, okay, but I saw that just one person, your intern, he's opening it. And I mean, it's okay. It's okay if he opens it and shares all the information with you. That's okay. But why are you not opening it? Because it's not to make them feel bad or make something like that. But I just want to know the reason. Because maybe there's a reason. Maybe they don't understand it. Maybe they don't have time. Maybe they want the intern to do it. That's okay. But I want to know the reason, because if it's something in the report, I want to know it to change it and to also prevent it next time. So I'm always checking it. If I can check it, I check it. And Of course, the delivery is key. Like I said at the beginning, you need to know how your dashboard you're creating is opened, and not check this at the end. This is also something you need to check at the beginning. And then again, in the end, because I also had customers that told me, we will use this in the workspace online. And then when I was there, they had all these physical copies of my dashboard. That's a different design. So always check these things. And maybe they're telling you, we want to use it in a workspace, but we also want to have handouts. Okay, we can create something for you that's actually fitting these needs. Because if you're creating something for a workspace or the app where people can click around and through, and they just make a physical copy of that, it's not the same. They're going to miss information because the purpose is different of the dashboard. I've been talking for an hour. My takeaway is if you want to design outside the box, always consider your audience. Ask some questions and have like one key message and check if you can answer that message, which options you could choose. Because there are a lot of options. There's the dark mode, light mode, minimalist, infographic. There are even more things you could try. And it's much easier to choose one of them if you know what you're doing, if you know the people you're designing for, and if you know what you want to show. Evaluate, a lot of evaluation. Use a storyboard and use templates or try templates. If you haven't tried templates until now, just start with a basic template and work from there. And I think the most important is keep it simple. Whatever you're designing, try to keep it as simple as possible. Because what I often see is I'm working with data every day. I'm working with Power BI every day. I know not everything, but a lot about Power BI and how it works. So sometimes when I'm designing, I'm like, oh, this is a cool feature. And if they click here, this happens, and a bookmark here, and a filter there, and a fill through there. But maybe your audience doesn't even know these things because they don't have the experience. So I try to remember myself every time, can I make this even more simple? I will make it even more simple. Thank you for your attention.